Okay, good evening. My name is Tom Martin. I'm the city planner, and I'd like to welcome you this evening to the presentation of the Downtown 2040 Master Plan. As we talk about downtown Lynchburg this evening, I'd like for you to reimagine it. Think about what has and what can be accomplished by planning, by having a vision, and not accepting the status quo. Think of downtown Lynchburg as being in a renaissance, a rebirth, a revival. Downtown Lynchburg is continuing to be revitalized by being given a new life. Think of it as a phoenix, that mythical bird that obtains new life by rising from the ashes of its predecessor. Before we speak about the revitalization of downtown, though, I think it's important to understand a little bit about the history of how downtown and the city has developed and how we've gotten to where we are today. We all know that downtown Lynchburg, or Lynchburg, was founded in 1757 when John Lynch established a ferry near where 9th Street is today. By 1786, Lynchburg was incorporated as a town, and it began to grow with a tobacco warehouse, Masonic lodge, stores, taverns, and churches. Tobacco remained the major industry and the economy, serving as a shipping and processing center for the product to Richmond, Virginia. During the Civil War, Lynchburg prospered, and the economy, during the Civil War, Lynchburg served primarily as a supply and hospital center, and as such, Lynchburg wasn't destroyed and suffered as much of the devastation that other towns and cities did in the state of Virginia. After the Civil War, Lynchburg continued to prosper. Its economy evolved into more of a manufacturing economy with the addition of foundries, cotton mills, textiles, shoe companies, and many larger homes were built in Rivermont Avenue, Diamond Hill, and surrounding neighborhoods around the downtown. Lynchburg also continued to grow in land area, as we see from this annexation map. A series of annexations, with the last annexation occurring in 1976, which is the lighter blue color. As Lynchburg continued to grow in its land area, there was a migration of retail. Now, this is very important for the way Lynchburg has grown and evolved. You see downtown Lynchburg here, 1757, retail migrating to Pittman Plaza in 1960. It has been said that Pittman Plaza did to downtown Lynchburg what General Sherman could never do, it destroyed it. And as the land area continued to expand, the retail started pushing further and further away from the downtown. River Ridge Mall in the 1980s, Ward's Crossing 2000, Ward's Crossing West in 2006. And we continue to migrate our retail because now we shop in entirely different ways. I mean, how many of us watch movies on Netflix, order our goods on Amazon or eBay, and order our music off of iTunes? So just as our retail migrated, it's interesting to look at the way our transportation system evolved and how that affected our downtown. Originally into downtown, you came in at 9th Street. And this is the 9th Street bridge circa 1875. Then it pushed away to the Williams Viaduct on 7th Street, John Lynch Bridge at 5th Street, and Carter Glass at the 29 Expressway. And these are the different bridges. And what's also is interesting is, we're not building infrastructure like we used to. This is the Williams Viaduct at 7th Street. What a beautiful bridge. And we replace it with things like John Lynch. This is a major gateway to our city that was constructed in 1988. And I'm back here somewhere playing the trumpet. I remember this day very well. And just as the transportation improvements went around Lynchburg instead of coming center city, the transportation improvements also had a profound effect on the neighborhoods in the downtown. This is the Fifth Street area around 1941, and you can see how differently it is now in 1997. Buildings gone, houses gone, but even more dramatically is at Carter Glass, where entire blocks were wiped out. This block here at 7th and Commerce between 8th Street, it can be argued that this is really the reason we are here this evening. It's the reason why we've had a successful downtown, and the reason that quite a bit more can be accomplished. In 1998, the new community development director at the time, Rachel Flynn, received word that these 6 buildings were going to be demolished. And they were going to be demolished to make way for surface parking areas. Rachel started forming relationships with the owners, historic district people, leaders, Lynchburg Historic District Foundation, National Trust for Preservation, the News and Advance, and other local leaders to bring attention to the plight of these buildings. Rachel and local leaders and the citizens of Lynchburg at the time did not accept the status quo anymore of tearing buildings down and building surface parking lots. Because once you start to lose so much of your history and your fabric, you pass a point of no return. Now, Albert Einstein said we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them. And this is so true, because after those buildings were saved, the city and the community embarked on a master planning process that led to the creation of the 2000 Downtown Riverfront Master Plan. And part of that kickoff, Mayor Joe Riley from the city of Charleston, South Carolina came and shared his vision of Charleston with, I'm sorry, I'll hold the mic up. Came and shared his vision of Charleston with us. And when Mayor Riley was asked, well, how are we going to fund these improvements? His response was, it's not about the money, it's about having a vision. And that is so true. It's about having a vision. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So thankfully, those buildings weren't torn down. Now, we have Cliff Edge Lofts, constructed in 1910, renovated in 2012. I believe this is about 52 loft apartments. Now we have Buzzard's Roost, renovated in 2004, and Trescone 8th, renovated in 2010. And this image really captures the essence of our downtown revitalization. It's new beginnings, it's celebrating with friends, it's the creation and the birth of a family. If the status quo had been accepted in 1998, this image would just fade away. I invite you to go on a journey with us this evening to 2040, a journey of celebrating our history, seeing new successes, and new beginnings. It's my pleasure to introduce to you this evening Mr. David Hill from Hill Studio as he presents the Downtown 2040 Master Plan.
Thank you, Tom. This brief presentation is going to direct you into a much more comprehensive document. Tonight I have just highlights of a very thorough downtown plan which has been produced, 267 pages. And so tonight I'm going to give you just a hint, just an introduction into this plan. And if you like what you see, I hope you'll go and review it. And we start off with what is a downtown plan? It's a blueprint, a 20-year blueprint for the downtown. A new plan is based on really good research. And some of the first research that we did on this plan was to determine the economic health of downtown. And so our economist, Aaron Arnett, he researched the residential market. He did a lot of research on what kind of businesses are successful in downtown and thriving downtown right now. And you can see on this first slide, a number of downtown merchants actually helped him with a survey, and they went out and and asked their customers where are they coming from, what are the things that they like in downtown. So we kind of got that research in the book. The second thing that Aaron Arnett did for us was he started to look at the trade areas for downtown, both the primary trade area and the secondary trade area, and discovered that there were some niches in there that could actually be very prosperous in the current downtown economic climate. And in fact could support and sustain not only the existing housing market, but a continued healthy retail and restaurant market in a downtown. And so this was very encouraging to us as we started our work. Now the next image, while economists were looking at these more numerical things, the planning staff, the historical staff, etc., started looking around for other signs of health. And this is the perfect picture for me to explain this to you. This is one of the things I really love about downtown Lynchburg. First, you have the old canal lock stones from the 18th century, and then you have a beautiful 19th century warehouse there, and then you have in it a new 21st century business. Not every city can claim that kind of history all going on in the very same place. And if you look a little bit to the right, you'll see the new greenway system going by, starting to really generate a lot of interest, and the old transportation system, the old railroads, of course, which helped to bring you Lynchburg in the first place. So us planners started looking around and saying, you know, this is a really healthy downtown. And it seems to be growing all over the place. You've had a lot of recent infrastructure improvements in downtown, and you can see that from the Shot Creek crane there, you've got a new businesses that are starting all around the downtown, so it seems to be showing a tremendous amount of health. But we don't just look at bricks and mortar things. We started to look at some of the social things as well. You know, these veterans, they were on week number 811 in a row coming to Monument Terrace steps when we stopped by to visit them. And that's just one example of the many continuing progressive things that we're starting to see in downtown. In fact, you know, Lynchburg has a history of doing great downtown plans, and we see it in signs that the citizens, employees, and just about everybody we talked to said that there's a history of great planning and care from Lynchburg, and it's working, so don't stop. And so what I'll be doing through this presentation is that there was a number of public engagement pieces that we did, and people provided us a number of things that I'll be showing as quotes. And so I'll start here. I won't tell you any more about these, you can just read them, but you know, people said, Lynchburg is becoming the city I want to live in. And this is just kind of a theme of a lot of the things we heard. People said, take this city to the next level. And then finally somebody said, make this an epic plan. That's setting the bar pretty high, but we'll try to deliver on that. And so as we started the work, we put together, maybe just a few months into this year-long process, a vision statement. And the vision statement tries to pull into one piece you know, the goal of what we're trying to do. And this was after doing some of the very early public research. And so, you know, in 2040, downtown Lynchburg will be bustling, a thriving urban core, economic, social, and cultural hub of Central Virginia, a destination and a livable neighborhood. It'll attract locals and tourists alike will enjoy the diverse offerings, historic architecture, unique topography, and vibrant public spaces that makes Lynchburg the heart of the region. This was our vision statement. So of course, you know, it's easy to stop where you are because you've already done really well. In fact, Lynchburg's already done a lot better than a lot of the communities that we work in. So it's easy to sort of be complacent and say, well, you know, that's enough, we're good. But there were a number of people that kept saying, what can Lynchburg be? What can the next level be? So the next 15 or 20 minutes is me describing very briefly what that might look like. And we start with where you've been. This was the famous 2000 plan that Tom alluded to a minute ago. This was done by Sasaki Associates out of Boston, a quite capable firm. And a couple of the key, you guys must have seen this before. This has been the blueprint for the last 20 years for Lynchburg. And there are a couple of things in here I'll bring to your attention. One of the things the Sasaki plan recommended was urban infill. That is, you've got a number of buildings that are here in the kind of yellow color, but you can infill them with the red ones that you see. That was one of the principles of this plan. Another was that it elevated the park system that you see in green to the stature of the other downtown pieces. This was really thinking about this for the very first time in Lynchburg. You see the riverfront park, you see across the river Amherst Park, Percival's Island, and smaller places downtown. This is where the park system became a very important player. And the third piece was that it recognized in planning for the first time that we can find the importance of the James River in orienting and many of the things that go on in downtown. So that was the blueprint 20 years ago. Here's your new blueprint. This is what we call the 2040 Downtown Master Plan. And a lot of the work of the Sasaki plan is continued and sustained. We're not finished yet. So you'll see here the dark color buildings are ones that still have infill opportunities. You'll see the importance of the park system, but you'll see a couple of other things in this plan that really exhibit making it a little bit better. You'll see that in this plan, we're going to continue the progress of the 2000 plan, but we're going to go a little further. We're going to tame the car and recognize its place in a thriving downtown. And we're going to adjust the city to make every downtown space walkable, living, and enjoyable. After all, in addition to the businesses, you now have over 900 apartments and over 1,400 people living in this downtown. So the next several slides are going to show some of the building blocks of how we're coming up with our plan. We call these the basics. And so one of the basics is the study area. If you look at this map here, the red area was the study area of the 2000 plan, and we're going to continue, that is the general study area of what we're looking at with the 2040 plan. However, we will be expanding beyond that border to look at inner neighborhoods and going down the river a little bit to capture some of that. And so this plan will look at how we connect a lot of the neighborhoods into the downtown. The next of the basics, and we really worked this pretty hard, is an exhaustive public engagement piece. This was not a bunch of planners sitting in the back room cooking up an idea. This was a lot of public engagement. You might have gotten one of these in the mail. This was a postcard inviting people to participate. This is just one of the many techniques that were used in this. If that wasn't enough, we did a big kickoff event. Many of you might have been there, and where we had the gigantic chalkboards where people could write down what they thought they really would like to see in downtown. We had online surveys, and there's a notebook of all that data that has come in that is as big as a telephone book. And we had a web page that was up during the entire process so that people could comment and react to the things that they were starting to see. I remember this from the very first kickoff meeting, and there are a number of these that you'll see throughout the presentation, because I want to keep emphasizing that a lot of the plans that you see are reacting to the things that the public had requested and the things the public liked and the things the public wanted changed. So you might have gone to some of these other things. We had listening sessions, especially focused to certain issues. We had pop-up events. I don't know if you saw the planners around town with their little tent and some of these flags, and they had a big bowl of Reese cups to try to get you to come and talk to them, and it was pretty successful. And we had a design workshop where the whole design team came and worked for the greater part of a week at the Craddock Terry, coming up with some ideas. Now the second piece of this is special character areas in Lynchburg, and this isn't talking to the public. This is our design team getting out and finding what makes Lynchburg unique. And the way that Lynchburg has adapted to the shape of the slopes down to the James and grown over the centuries is truly unique. This is what you have that Roanoke doesn't have, that Philadelphia doesn't have. Nobody else has got this. And it's the combination of 4 unique character areas in a very compact space. And so I take a look here. Down next to the river, you have an area we've identified as the lower bluff, the riverfront and lower bluff area. Up in the middle, Main Street business areas. And then up at the top of the hill, you've got the Monument Terrace upper bluff. And then a fourth character area really is the gateways. How do you get to downtown? You know, everybody comes into downtown from one of these gateway areas. And so if you look at this, not many places have any of these, especially to have 4 of these is quite remarkable. So, you know, the lower bluff, 18th, 19th century warehouses and factories. And since so many of them have been saved, a lot of them are sporting new uses, and it's quite unique and different. Walk up the hill just a couple of blocks, and you've got the Main Street business area. And these are 19th century buildings that were designed for multi-use, and they continue to host multi-uses. Very interesting and different from those others. And if you've got enough energy, you walk up a couple more blocks, and you get to the top, Monument, or the upper bluff. And you know, this is where the institutional character is. This is where the old churches, the courthouse, the police station, you know, it's on the high ground, which is really interesting, you know, as a metaphor. The fourth piece, you know, as Tom introduced us, are the gateways, and Tom mentioned it. You know, Lynchburg has wrestled a lot with the 20th century gateways, but there's a real opportunity in these gateways now. Okay, so buildings. You know, buildings, of course, a very important part of your downtown, and the composition of the buildings is unique and cherished asset. In fact, over 50% of the survey respondents in the online surveys discuss, in some way, old buildings as a key resource. And Lynchburg has been very progressive in some of its placing of these buildings and districts on historic registers. And so in this image, you'll see the blue areas are in national or state historic districts. The red areas are where they're local historic districts, and the gray areas have both the national and the local historic district. Now, Lynchburg's been very good about putting some of those surrounding neighborhoods on both types of registers. The downtown, by and large, has remained only on the National Register District. The plan shows and recommends that we create local historic districts downtown to permanently protect the resources. You know, with the National Register District, the resources, say when you do a historic renovation, it's protected for 5 years, but that's it. So the local historic district will protect the resources beyond 5 years. It'll also provide design guidelines that are specific to the downtown and really specific to those character areas. And finally, the local historic districts could prevent inappropriate demolition. So looking at Lynchburg's architectural character, we took on looking at and experimenting with 4 different key adaptive reuse sites. And this one, I believe, Lynchburg's been working with for quite a while. And what we did was we asked our architects and architectural historians to generate some thoughts that might even generate more ideas. 863 Church Street, the Carter Glass Building, was previously studied by CJMW as a multi-use building, and these plans are available at City Hall. 1112 Main Street and 901 Main Street were studied for their adaptive reuse potential. And these are monumental buildings. They're very difficult to adapt to just about any use. And at that time, they were both for sale. And they both had extraordinary potential, like the dome on the skylight that's existing on that one at 901 Main Street. And so we studied both of these, and the 901 Main Street, I believe, is going forward as a public event space. It's going to be pretty exciting, right next to City Hall. Okay. So downtown, of course, is not only the buildings, it's not only the streets, it's parks. And really we segregate this into 2 different categories for study. The large parks are about promoting growth and economic development. The small parks imbue green space into the downtown, making it much more livable. And there's been a real emphasis in this plan on the importance of gathering spaces, making downtown work for people and work for people at home. And so what you'll see, a number of parks placed in the map and studied in more detail. Now, in the last several years, Lynchburg has started to host concerts in Riverfront Park, and they've been extraordinarily successful. And so we started to study how to make that even better. And so one of the schemes that we studied was trying to handle some of the ideas that came up in the public meetings, which was, could there be a public-private partnership, for example, using both types of lands and incorporating the Bluff Walk to create a theater for about 4,500 people that still solve some of these urban design issues. Then we started looking at Riverfront Park itself. You know, it's a very linear park, and it does have some constraints, particularly with the tracks. And so I know Lynchburg, since the 2000 plan, has continued to plan for its Riverfront Park. This is a 2006 scheme by Nelson, Bird, and Woltz. And it started to show how you could celebrate that canal and use a number of the green spaces in the park. And so here's a little bit of an update on the Riverfront Park. And this one, the labels here show the additions that we might suggest. For example, near the spray grounds, a playground and public restrooms that could be available for everyone. A bike trail that would continue through the park, the future River Edge Trail on the outside of the railroad tracks that would be, it could be accessed by a bridge across. And then here you'll see on the right-hand side a potential amphitheater alternative in Riverfront Park. So we studied that as well, and could it fit well, and it could still accommodate about 4,500 people. Now, one of the things that is starting to finally get some legs is this idea of a canal park, which might be just upriver from Riverfront Park. And so, you know, Canal Park also, for historians, it's really ground zero for Lynchburg's industrial and transportation history, and a lot of it is still there. You know, in the Canal Park area, you see the Amazement Square and its addition, you see the skateboard park, and then in the lower pictures, you start to see some of these bridges and old canal locks that are still there, and you kind of have to get down next to the river to see some of the stones that are still there and could be put back into place. And so the plan for Canal Park is really about connecting some of the dots. And in the lower right picture here, you see a way to connect the greenways from the Ivy Creek Trail on through this park and to Riverfront Park. There's a way to do it. It's really kind of threading the needle. And you'll also see on the upper sketch there stairs to connect the street. That's 6th Street. There's a way to get through there too. So the Canal Park is a very interesting and different kind of park. It's an interpretive history, and it kind of connects a lot of these other happening park resources. Foundry Park. A lot of people know this area also as the Intermet site. And there were a number of different comments that the people really wanted to access the river. And you know, in a lot of different forms, and boy, do we have a site for you. This is just downstream from downtown, and you'll see here a conceptual plan for Intermet Park or Foundry Park. And one of the things that it does is it takes the Concord Turnpike, and it wraps it around the back of that park. And so you can see how it's wrapped around the back, still allowing the truck access, but allowing for parking and boat launches. And then the entire rest of that old foundry site can be tuned toward the river, so people can walk from the river back into the green spaces. And it's one of the very few places that you can actually access the river from the ground. So this will be completed with a number of access ramps, terrace seating, et cetera, to really celebrate the river there. Now, there are a number of other small parks in the downtown, and the purpose for the small parks is to really create great and livable downtown places for all the residents, and to extend some of the season year-round. For example, this is the old Clay Street Reservoir. Here's our chance to do something with a very interesting old engineering piece, and that's to maybe bring back some of the water, but in this case make it only 4 inches deep and turn it into an ice rink. You know, this is the kind of thing that would help the Parks and Rec extend the season for all Lynchburg residents and also be a real amenity to the local residents nearby. Similarly, there's a dog park planned for the corner of 12th and Grace. That's this little triangular area. That's especially for a lot of downtown Lynchburg's new four-legged residents, as well as some of the neighborhoods nearby. City Hall Plaza, this is an existing parking lot at the base of that big elevator. And you know, it's just one of these places that has great potential, doesn't really change the use too much, but it really makes it more of a celebrated downtown space. This was one of the longer quotes, and but this person was discussing, you know, how you could really make each small downtown place rich as a part of this. He said there isn't a ton of public gathering spaces or seating, so you know, this is to try to address some of those needs. The community market. Now this is a place where we really start to work not only on the community marketplace, but allow that to come into the street and address a place that we already have a whole lot of people crossing the street. In fact, the Visitor Center, 1112 Main Street, the Farmers Market, they're all right in there together. And this is what we call a destination landing pad. This is a welcome mat for downtown as people would approach Lynchburg from the expressway. And it strikes a balance between heavy pedestrian traffic and the vehicles. The vehicles are still loud in there, but they're the guests. The host is all the pedestrians that are there. So here's a plan view of that, and then you know, it would become a gathering place. And then here's a little perspective of it. You can see the landing pad on Main Street there on the left side of the illustration, and how the farmers market could be joined to it, making this a really nice destination outdoor place. Trails and pedestrian connections, also discussed at length in the plan. And the red lines here indicate the progress that you've really had since about the 2000 plan, and a lot of the dashed lines are really connecting the dots and making a series of outdoor walking loops that really get people back close to the river and get them up and down the hills. You know, the scenery of some of these trails is one of the most cherished assets, and this is discussed at length in some of the public engagement notes. And Lynchburg's done a terrific job with the Bluff Walk, kind of celebrating that scenery that you see. And that's nothing new. Lynchburg is no stranger to siting walkways to get the great views ever since 1925, taking advantage of that scenery to make an interesting walk up and down the slopes. So we couldn't resist continuing some of the excitement that the Bluff Walk has generated and extending it. In this illustration, you'll see the existing lower Bluff Walk ending at about the Craddock Terry Hotel, but there's a way to make it go up the slope a bit and then continue on an old public right-of-way across Horseford, across Pearl, and these would be bridges, pedestrian bridges, and actually connecting some of the more recently built hotel properties. And that kind of investment would then help to incent new investment in that gateway area right to downtown. Another one of the pieces is what we call the Upper Bluff Walk, and this was in the original 2000 plan. It's just a little bit more updated and detailed version of it. And so that would be up there near the top of the hill, right next to those institutional uses. And it would be very similar to the Lower Bluff Walk, except the views would be even better. And then connecting Lower and Upper Bluff Walk are what we call hill climbs. You see the one here in the lower right is one that would go up 6th Street. make that kind of an entertaining climb up there with interpretive things. And the one on the left will be the 12th Street hill climb, and you see this is an existing picture. This is what it could look like, once we get that landing pad in there and turn and take people up to the upper bluff walk. So, as Lynchburg matures and starts to implement this plan, you got to think about the opportunities of the street as a public place. This is existing condition, but if you think about this and start to really celebrate your restaurants and your stores, you can start to pull the vitality out into the street with these things we call parklets. And so you'll see in the plan some studies here. Lynchburg can look to its own past precedent for how to make the streets great, how to make these public areas, which will be a real climb, sort of fun. And so there are lessons in what we've already know from Lynchburg. Okay, parking. Okay, this map gets us started on the parking idea. About 40 acres, or 25% of the entire non-right-of-way land in downtown, is given over to parking. And it's these blue areas that you see on the map. And this is private parking. And the future of growth in downtown is in those surface lots. That's the future. That's the easy land to convert to something better, a higher and better use. And so we started to look at what's going on in Lynchburg, and a couple of diagrams here that I need to explain. One is the current condition of parking. Right now, the little sketch on the right shows if you're going to go to a store, you're going to put your car in a garage and pay some money and then walk all the way to the store. Whereas if you just park outside, well, that's free. And so it seems like a little bit backwards. So we started looking at what's more of a logical condition. What if parking in the garages didn't really cost a lot because you're doing all the foot effort once you put the garage in there, once you put the car in the garage. And maybe on-street parking right next to these stores should cost more because, my goodness, you're paying for the convenience, right? So there's kind of a free market approach to this issue. And I'm going to tell you that successful downtowns already have it this way. They already have done it. And this is a place that Lynchburg needs to look to solve some of these parking issues. Now what it'll do, if you can implement this, we call it park once. The idea is you get to downtown, you put your car in a place where it doesn't really cost a lot, and you walk around, you park once to get to a lot of things. Successful implementation of that will start to change the real estate market to facilitate those private parking lots becoming building sites. That's what that's about. Now, here's part of that equation too. How do you make parking in the garages work and make it better? And what we could do, these are the 3 sites that were studied and recommended by previous parking studies to continue to work with. 2 are existing garages, 1 is a potential garage. And the idea would be that as a central to almost everywhere downtown, is that as these garages are replaced and adjusted, they can park just as many or more cars, but it doesn't have to be just a single use, because walking by 1,000 linear feet of parking garages is a pretty deadly experience. And so as they are replaced and upgraded, if you look at this little sketch on the lower right, you can put just as many cars in the garage, but you take the first floor and you make it retail to make it something pretty exciting along the street, and you take advantage of, on top of the garage, turning that into something that could really benefit downtown, like maybe a hotel or something like that. And so, this kind of sketch shows the existing condition, and walking by that garage is pretty dull. I must admit, after about 400 or 500 feet, it just is the same. But what if it could be something like this, where it really didn't feel like a garage? You're getting all the same cars still in it, but you're using that retail and enlivening that space, and you can see you can go up higher. You can also use the elevator creatively to get people up those hills in downtown. And we really couldn't resist taking on a couple. You know, the one on the left may be able to be renovated with historic tax credits. The one on the right changed as it's replaced, you know, and putting the retail in there to make it a lot more lively and engaging multi-use building. Along those lines, the plan addresses transport and mobility. And Tom's slides of the infrastructure improvements of the 1950s through 1980s showed a city concentrating on getting citizens through the city like there was no reason to be downtown. Well, now there is. And so we want to plan for it. We want to plan for walkability. And what is walkability? It's really about having what we call complete streets. Every detail of the street and the sidewalk is considered when you start to revitalize it. This is a little town of Wytheville, which is done, this is an existing picture. This was what was done as they renovated their downtown streets. The idea is to make it more lively, more walkable, more enjoyable for everyone. Now, in order to do this, the street directions are going to need to change, and there are myriad reasons to do it. We have here the major one-way couple in downtown, following the last 3 or 4 traffic studies that were proposed, would be converted back to two-way traffic. There are myriad reasons to do it. I'm just going to show you a couple of examples. Why? Well, one is what citizens told us. The people spend a lot of time circling the block, especially with the one-way streets. Hard to find, get to businesses, etc. But probably more of a concern is that in a two-lane, one-way situation, the pedestrian starts to cross the street, the car on the left stops for him, the car on the right cannot see that pedestrian, and it's very dangerous. I've had this happen to myself right in front of a city hall. A second of the many issues that our traffic planners discuss is this idea of retail eclipsing. That is, in one-way streets, we do see the stores in front of us as we're traveling across the cross street, but the buildings that are near that car are not seen. Those are called eclipsed buildings, and this translates into a lack of economic development. Compared to the two-way comparables, these buildings do not do well. And changing to two-way complete streets with shared bike lanes, parking, walking, is the trend of successfully revitalizing downtowns. And all the ones that our traffic planners worked in, that is Wade Walker with Alta, all of them have successfully solved the delivery issue on a case-by-case basis with making this work. We also studied the hopper, and the hopper you've had working here, and one of the recommendations was perhaps make the hopper go that yellow route there so it can actually help get people way up the hill rather than them having to walk the entire hill. In fact, dealing with topography, one of the solutions you'll see is better utilizing a series of public elevators to get all ability levels up and down that hill from the river up to the institutional uses. Now, bikeability, you don't see the bikes in Lynchburg the way you see in other cities, and it's because if you ever tried to ride them up the hill, you realize what an issue that might be. And so what we're trying to do in the plan is very subtle, but there are ways to take bikes so that you can actually get them up the hill easily by walking them up the stairs, and even looking at some motorized methods that you'll see in the book. So, not only do we look at downtown, but we look at how you connect downtown to the inner neighborhoods that you see here, to the outer neighborhoods that you see all around Lynchburg, and to the 6 colleges that are nearby, 5 of them within the city limits. This seemed to be a real opportunity for Lynchburg to take advantage of the college, the growing college community that you have. And so, some of it is looking at the existing bus routes. The little black dots there are bus stops. And they're very, very convenient. There are bus stops all over some of these routes, but the disadvantage of this is that if you start way out on some of those roads like Timberlake, it takes so long to get to downtown because of all the stops. There may be a way to sort of have both. And this was an idea that came about after talking to some of the college folks, is that maybe there can be an express bus system that supplements the existing bus system that gets people from the outer neighborhoods and from the colleges right into downtown, minimizing their travel and stop distances along the way. And so this is discussed thoroughly in the plan. And not only that, but maybe there's a way to extend the bike lanes out to help to get some of those folks from the outer neighborhoods, and particularly the college areas, into downtown. And maybe we should take some of these bike lanes and provide lighting along them so that commuters could use them in the winter, for example, when you have to ride at night if you're going in and out of downtown. Finally, gateways. This is how we introduce people to our downtown. And there are a number of them here that you can see. And this is along the same theme of a number of our other quotes: greener, more walkable, etc., and more welcoming. And so how do you do that? You know, right now we have a great big project under construction right here on the bypass coming into downtown on Main Street. And so when that project's finished, really get out there and landscape this interchange. This is your welcome mat. And this is how the bridge will look when it's finished. But when you really think about that Main Street, it's 4 lanes going across there, and there may be, especially since there's not too much developed on the right, maybe you could take that and make it a 2-lane bridge and give another lane to trees, to bikes, to pedestrians. Similarly, we looked at the Lynch Bridge and how it has changed over time, doesn't have the traffic counts it used to, and you could implement this kind of idea right this minute to get pedestrians, bicycles across the river to some of the beautiful work that Amherst has been doing, and that's a way to access the river right now from downtown Lynchburg. And you might invite Amherst Park visitors to come across and have lunch. A similar scheme worked out on the bridge that connects to the north of downtown. Finally, real opportunities, long-term thinking. How do you get to downtown from the new bypasses that have been built, in particular 460-29? And this route was considered really with the retirement of the landfill that you see in the bottom part of this. Is there a way to get people downtown that you could take them mostly across public lands and give them the incredible scenery of the James River and the downtown in the distance on a parkway? And so we even studied how that might occur with a real long-term gateway experience from the bypasses into downtown. So I know that's a lot to get through, and I was just trying to touch on some of the very surface of this. You know, what is this? It's a 20-year blueprint for downtown. And over the last half hour, we've talked about what Lynchburg really can be, how to take the city to the next level. It's going to take everybody to do it, and it requires that we think differently. Solutions that worked to get you this far will not work to get you to the next level. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tom, who's going to tell you how you can express your support.
Thank you, David. So, where do we go from here? So this evening, if you would like to learn more about specific areas, we have boards on the side, and they're separated into things such as utilities, historic and architecture, parks and recreation, parking, traffic, parks and recreational spaces, so on. There will be staff members at each board, so we invite you to come up and speak with us in more detail. How can you be involved from here? On August 22nd at 4 p.m., there will be a Planning Commission public hearing. We invite you to come and speak and show your support or what you think should be improved to the Planning Commission. And we'll also be out in town in pop-up events, and a schedule of those events are on the website, downtown2040.com. So again, thank you for coming out this evening, and we invite you to go to the boards and speak with us in more detail. Thank you, and have a great evening.